Okay, my name is Morna Gerard and I'm interviewing Molly Hayden for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is November 30th, 2017, and the interview is taking place at the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, Georgia. So, Molly, start with an easy question. Please tell me where you were born and what year you were born.
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, actually Belleville, Illinois, St. Louis area, in 1978.
Okay. Can you describe your family's political leanings?
My immediate family has always been Democrats. My father used to run for local political office. We grew up in a very, very small town of 4,000 people in a town called Caseyville, Illinois, and he ran for public office. My extended family is a great mix. This current political climate has definitely shadowed that a bit, and I would probably say before the last couple of years, I maybe didn't know which way people voted. That being said, I know that some of my immediate family has swayed between voting Democrat and Republican, so no one has ever been staunch in their political leanings, except probably myself.
Well, tell me, like, for the record,
Mm-hmm.
what party do you generally support?
I have always been left-leaning, and I have always have wondered about our political system being a two-party system, especially knowing other cultures and other countries. But, I mean, that being said, in every political or presidential election that I was able to vote in, I have always voted Democrat.
Okay. Moving away from politics just for a second, I want to talk to you about how you got to Georgia and about your profession. So can you tell me how you got from where you were born to Savannah?
So the short story is I grew up in St. Louis. I've been a photographer and a journalist. I started my own studio when I was 20, and I had an opportunity to move to Hawaii to work for a photographer friend of mine. It was supposed to be a 3-month gig. I moved out there. I stayed for 3 years. I met my husband, who was also a journalist. He was an editor at a newspaper I was working at. He and I moved to Germany. We got a job working for an American newspaper there. We had a 5-year visa. And it was for an army newspaper, so it was a government job. And from there, after our visa expired, he was offered a job at the Savannah Corps of Engineers. So we moved here sight unseen. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child. And so we've been here, it'll be 3 years in March.
So that all kind of brought together your profession and your travels to get to Savannah. What school did you go to? Did you study journalism?
I did. I studied English in St. Louis, and I have kind of a hodgepodge college career. I went to college, then I traveled, and then I went to college, and then I traveled. But yeah, I studied English and marketing.
Okay. Have you? So you are currently? Do you work independently, or
I do. I'm a freelance photographer and journalist. I write for the Savannah Morning News, Do Savannah, Savannah Magazine, Well Fed when it was in publication, and then I do freelance projects on the side.
Is there a theme to the work that you do, or is just everything and anything kind of thing?
Generally, I mean, photography-wise, it's mostly photojournalistic. I also do video, photojournalistic style. As far as what I write, it really depends on the topic or what they need. I do a lot with like arts and entertainment, and I mean basic storytelling features. More so than hard cutting news stories.
Okay. And so you said you're married.
I am.
How many kids do you have?
Just one.
Just one. Boy or girl?
Boy. His name is Oscar Blue.
Nice.
Which we didn't know at the time that is a beer, but it's spelled differently if that counts.
It's a good beer.
It is a very good beer.
So, have you been involved in political activities in the past?
I have. I mean, on a small scale, I've always, I've canvassed. Coming from St. Louis, there was always protests with Monsanto and things like that. So I've always been on the side of the environment and the people, more so than the big companies, which I think is the clear and easiest political divide that people can see between left and right.
I see that more and more, like right now. That's, yes. And you have family members, I know you said your father was a Democrat and pretty active, but do you have any family members who were involved in activism and in activist sort of activities?
Not as forward. I don't have any family members that, like, say, marched. I know that my mother used to tell me that she always wrote some stern letters. So I think that, deep down and like the history of her actions, raising small children, that was her way of being involved. But nothing other than that sticks out.
Okay. And had you personally participated in any marches before?
A few local, a few in St. Louis, but nothing to this magnitude or scale.
And what kinds of protests were you participating in?
Mostly like against Monsanto or certain laws, protesting a Walmart coming to the city, sort of like against, I would say, big business keeping things local.
Okay. So you did march on January 21st. Which march did you go to?
I was in DC.
In DC. And why did you want to march?
It was a very poignant time for me. There was never a question of like, am I going to do this? It was sort of, how am I going to do this? And there was also so many people from Savannah that it was easy to go. And as a mother, it was the first time I had left my child away for a night, and I was gone for 3 nights, and so it was very powerful for me, especially as a breastfeeding mother. And I felt helpless after the election, so that was a way for me to get involved and to be inspired to make change in the future.
How quickly, let's go back to the election itself. Mm-hmm. Could you describe how you felt the night of the election?
My husband was out of town, for work, and it wasn't the election results, obviously, that we had all thought, but it was becoming more and more clear what was going to happen. So a friend of mine, Melissa Vanderberg, she and her son, who was 7 at the time, came over, and we had like champagne and we made them pizza, and it was supposed to be a very joyous occasion, and we like talked to them. I mean, my child was very young, he was 1 at the time, so maybe he didn't understand, but we talked to them about what was going on, and when it became a little more clear and it became bedtime, and because my husband was out of town too, and my child was so young, like I should have slept, but I couldn't. I stayed up until the final ballot, even though I knew hours before what was going to happen. And I felt defeated. I felt sad, not for myself, but just for everyone. And I felt sorry for those who were being misguided by the promises that I myself knew wouldn't be kept. Like it was very clear to me, and it was very confusing how so many people, and even today when I hear people sort of defend Trump and his actions, it still doesn't make sense to me. I understand I understand those opinions can be made, but especially as a journalist, when I rely so heavily on facts and this introduction of fake news cycle, it's disheartening at the highest level.
Oh yeah. So immediately, like after the election, how long did it take for you to start making plans to go to the march?
I think I knew about the march in passing. I honestly don't remember the timeline. I think the first couple of weeks was an absolute blur. I just felt a sadness that I had never felt before, and I felt it for my whole country. And then when people started talking about this and the momentum started to grow, especially locally, that was a way for me to latch on to some positivity.
Yeah. And why did you decide to go to DC instead of marching in Savannah? I guess at the time that the DC march was announced, you didn't know that there'd be a Savannah march, did you?
Possibly. I mean, the magnitude of the DC march, it was a chance to be a part of history and to help, even a little scale. I mean, one tiny body might not make a difference, but if everyone does come together, and I mean, you saw the magnitude of it. There were so many people there that it was more of a stand than a march at times, because there simply wasn't any room. But the momentum and the energy and just being on the ground and saying that we're here.
Yeah. Was there one, when you were planning to get to the march, I mean, you've protested about various different things in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Were those the same things that were kind of making you want to go to this march, or were they?
Not at all. It was something so different and something so visceral, and I think being a new mother helped that, because it's no longer about yourself and it's no longer about your country, and you can be sad about it, but when you have a child, like, that sort of mama bear instinct comes out at you, like you're messing with this child, you're messing with all children, you're messing with future generations.
So tell me about your process for planning. Who did you go with?
Mm-hmm.
How did you plan to get there?
We drove. I actually drove. I drove my friend Melissa's car. So in the car was myself, Melissa Vanderberg, and Rachel Jackson, who are just good friends of mine. And we sort of caravan with Coco Pappy and Stephanie Rains and Clinton, who were in another car up there. So we kind of left around the same time. I have a good friend who lives in Alexandria, so I stayed with her. She is an officer in the Army. I actually met her in Germany, and although she possibly felt the way I did because of her occupation, she did not march, but she had friends in town who were staying with her as well, so her house was sort of a common ground for people who came from various parts of the country. And we drove up there the night before. We woke up very early, took the train in, and began our day.
So let's talk about that, taking the train in.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw the number of people at the train station,
we woke up very, very
Okay.
early. We woke up, I think we left at like 5:30.
Oh.
So because we didn't want there to be a possibility of us not getting into the city. So there were quite a few people, but nothing to the magnitude of photos that I saw on social media afterward of people struggling to get into the city. So we got there very early. In fact, we went and had breakfast before, and once we were done, and then we met our crew and all marched together as a city.
So what time did you get to the rallying area?
Maybe around 9.
So at that point, it was
already packed. Like,
okay.
we couldn't, where we were standing, we could not see any of the speakers or entertainers. We could hear them muffled, but at that point it was already kind of packed to the hilt.
At what point did you realize that this was going to be bigger than anyone expected?
I mean, when you're in it, it's hard to understand the magnitude of it. And, you would stand on ledges or climb trees to kind of see. And it was amazing seeing that many people. And I don't think that I understood the magnitude of it until I saw the aerial photographs later or heard everyone else's stories. I knew so many people that were there. And, I mean, obviously finding them was moot. And it was something that, like, we barely even tried. Because I had friends from all over the country that had traveled to DC as well. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about, meeting up with people. It was about meeting new people. And it was just very inspiring to know that that you weren't alone and that you weren't in the minority of the way that you were feeling.
When you're in the crowd, did you have like an emotional reaction to what was going on around you?
I wasn't as sensitive to it as I was like when I was in my living room reading the election results, sobbing like a toddler. It was really inspiring, and I think that there was probably some times where I was just so happy that I was choking back tears, and it was the first time that I felt sincere happiness in the past few months.
So you said when you were at the rallying spot, you were kind of, everything was muffled. I think that's pretty much the majority.
Yeah.
Where were you standing? Do you remember?
We were by the Native American Museum, in sort of this little like cave, this sort of like hole, but there were so many of us there, and there were so many of us with the Panhandle Slim signs that at one point Coco got up on this ledge and she was like, "Hey Savannah, hold your signs up." And when we didn't realize how many people were there, and then just like the whole crowd just like cheered and went wild. And I think it was inspiring in that way, and it was so easy to pick ourselves out. There was a picture of a huge crowd on the cover of the UK paper, the Daily News, and I can clearly see myself and my sign. And I have friends in London who saw that on the cover and said, "I saw you on the cover of the paper." And I would never have been as recognizable without that particular sign.
And can you tell me what your sign?
Yes, it was a very large Dolly Parton sign, and it said, "My mistakes are no worse than yours just because I'm a woman."
These signs are amazing.
Amazing.
Absolutely, like, outstanding. Clinton has given us all the pictures that he took.
Good, yeah.
And they're actually we're one of the ones with all of you holding signs up.
Yeah.
We're printing out really large.
Nice.
And putting it up in our conference room.
And that could be the picture where she just said, "Hey, Savannah."
Amazing. Yeah, that's great. So when you're in the crowd, you have your reasons for being there. Looking at like the signs of other people, what kind of other issues were you seeing being represented?
What's really interesting is there was a sign that struck me. There was brilliant signs, and it was, I think so much time has passed that I can't remember. So many of them made me laugh and made me giggle and made me happy, and so many of them checked my privilege. There was a woman who was carrying a sign that said, "Y'all are going to show up to the next Black Lives Matter rally." And that one, it really did make me think about the issues at hand and what we as privileged people, women, put our energy toward. And it did make me step back a little bit and say, okay, there's more than this issue. Like, if I'm collectively going to practice what I preach, then there are changes I need to make myself.
Yeah. And talking about Black Lives Matter and the sort of like the makeup of the crowd, did you see any diversity within the crowd? There
was. Predominantly white women, of course. It was a lot older than I expected. I would say the largest population that I saw was definitely over 40 or 50. And I was surprised by that. But I'm not surprised by it now, learning the history. Like, these women have been through it before. We haven't. And I'm not that far behind them. You know, I'm almost 40. But they have lived it. They have seen it more so. And I think, like, my generation was a little more sheltered to it. So it was interesting to me. But yes, majority white.
Before I go on to talk more about this, I'm assuming you were, but were your family supportive of your journey to DC?
I mean, yes and no. They weren't necessarily against it, but there were quite a few family members who just didn't mention it or didn't talk about it, even though I would send them pictures from the rally and I would say things. They wouldn't necessarily respond, and I don't think it was malicious. I just think that they subscribed to the I'm not political, which hurts me a little bit. It hurts me to hear people say that, because I don't think that that's an option in our world today. But I don't necessarily know that they understand that, and I haven't been so brave as to get into those conversations because I know my audience and I know the people that I can have a conversation with and the people that I can't. But there were a few people that did support me and say they were proud of me.
And was your husband supportive?
Absolutely, yes. He stayed home with my son, and he actually brews beer. So he and my son, as much as he could help, brewed beer while we were gone, and they named it "This Is What Democracy Tastes Like."
That's wonderful. And that's what I was going to ask you next. Let's talk about some of the chants because there some really great chants came out of this protest, including "This Is What Democracy Looks Like." Were there any others that you remember, you recall that were like that you enjoyed or that were impactful?
The chants?
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, I know at the time, yes, but I honestly cannot recall any of the other chants. There were so many. I don't recall. I'm sure I would recognize it if I heard it.
Were you comfortable chanting along with the crowd?
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people are, and some people are.
Yeah.
Like they are not. While you were in, this huge crowd, did you see law enforcement officers? And if you did, like, how was the interaction with the crowd?
I don't recall seeing many of them. There were a few people that I suspected to be undercover law enforcement. There were a few people who I think were being a little bit defiant, that like people that were sort of saying nasty things to us, that were saying like we won, that were wearing Trump t-shirts, and I think, and I'm not saying that like our side was completely innocent in that. I think like once people are antagonized to a certain point, that we have become a very reactionary society. So, but that was not the norm. Those were very small and insignificant happenings throughout the day.
Okay. So did you see more than one group of like the Trump supporters, or? Yes,
there was also a motorcycle rally that was happening in an adjacent park. It was a pro-Trump rally, but it was very small in comparison. Like, yeah, embarrassingly small in comparison.
Also, like being in this huge crowd, can you talk about the mood of the people around you?
I mean, it was all pretty wide-eyed. I think people were feeling the power and energy of the crowd. There wasn't a whole lot of like negativity. That it wasn't the underlying feeling for me at least wasn't we're mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore. It was more like we are coming together, we are all collectively sad, but we're here. This is how many people believe what you believe, and together we can move forward and make change. And I think it's happening. I think it's very slowly, not as a fast perhaps as we want it to, but I think it is changing. I think that people are more woke than they were a year ago.
On a practical level, you were there with a bunch of your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have plans for keeping together, or if you got separated, what you would do to sort of find one another again?
Not really. I think we just sort of stayed together. At least like I had a buddy, and I wasn't going to lose that person, and I would grab onto the back of her coat when they were going through the crowd. I know another friend of mine, Stephanie Rains, she showed up late to our meeting point, so she was trying to find us in this huge crowd, and my phone wasn't working that well. It wasn't properly charged. It wasn't a great phone anyway, so the battery would only last like maybe an hour. And I sent her a photo. She was like, "Where are you? Send me a photo of what you see." So I sent her a photo. I said, "This is in front of me," and she miraculously found us. And she was so happy, and we were so happy to see each other, because you want to experience that with your friends. Like obviously you have all of this, like 500,000 new friends, but it's such a life-changing experience that I think like it does, rekindle these friendships and relationships on a local level, which is needed to make change locally.
And to move forward and know you have people locally that
Correct.
support what you
Yeah, it makes life
a
little more livable.
So there was a lot standing around
Mm-hmm.
at the
There was a lot
rally
of standing.
spot. Did you get to march?
Somewhat, yes. I would say we didn't march to the final point just because we were at the end of the line. So we did march. We marched for maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and then it just stopped. And we stood around for a little bit longer, and then the crowd, like at least where we were standing, just sort of dissipated, and everyone went off, and that's when bathroom breaks and things started to creep up. And that is also when we sort of took to the streets, and I think, that helped as well, just walking around DC. We randomly found one of Scott's Panhandle Slim signs, and we were able to bring it with us and return it to the person back here in Savannah. We talked to a lot of people about the signs. We created these conversations, people who were at the march and people who weren't. So it was maybe a little bit of a rogue march, but we did march.
I think those signs really were probably a great conversation starter.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine. I have not seen any photographs from the march that had something so interesting
Mm-hmm.
and colourful and easily recognisable that people would want to know what's going on with this.
And what's interesting too is because a lot of people, friends of friends and people that knew people that were going from Savannah, I had a friend from Philly run into someone else, and she was like, "Oh, you must be from Savannah." So it was very recognizable that we were from Savannah, and I think it was sort of shocking for people as well. This is South, this is deep South, and there was such a huge representation of women and men that came.
Yeah. And so you wandered around. What did you go for dinner? Did you?
Yes, I went to dinner with Melissa and Stephanie Rains, Coco, and Clinton. We walked to a couple of different restaurants, found one with the shortest wait. So we had a really nice dinner, and then that night, Melissa and I went to a Planned Parenthood benefit. And we tried to last, but we were pretty exhausted. And so it was a long night, but it was a good night. And then I think like we stopped at a she's going to be very upset with me for not remembering the name of it, but it's this very famous chili place in DC. So we had like, late night chili and kind of assessed our day and talked about it, and then slept in the next day, which is something, I hadn't done as a mother for a good year and a half.
So the Planned Parenthood benefit, you knew that was going on?
Yeah, we had already purchased our tickets.
That's great.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that was going on. So let's talk about the day after. Were you watching anything on the news?
We were traveling that day. We were driving back. So I think we were all talking about it. Rachel, who had come with us, she marched with her sister, so she had a very different experience than we did, and I think we met up with her in and out during the day. So we were all kind of talking about our experiences, and definitely looking at all of the photos and all of the news sites, and I think that's when the actual magnitude of the march really set in, because you can experience it, but I mean, obviously, like an aerial shot versus on the ground is going to give you two polar opposite perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And what time did that's a long trip back.
We, so halfway, while we were driving home, I put something out on social media to see if anyone had any friends in Durham, and within an hour we had a free place to stay. With people that had also gone to the march, who we did not know. They were friends of friends. So we, because we left late in the afternoon, we had a kind of a casual morning. We all went to breakfast in Alexandria, and and then we got to experience Durham a little bit as well, and we slept on a floor and a couch, and some people that were very, very gracious to.
It's a great sense of community.
Absolutely.
You just have to ask, and people are stepping up. So when you got back to Savannah, how were you feeling?
I was feeling inspired. I was feeling a little more of myself as a woman, as a feminist, as just a human being, and I think, those years prior, I think once you move to a new place, especially you become a mother, there were all of these changes that hit me all at once. So it was, I think, the first step back to me. So it was very personal. And I felt much more a part of the community. And I think that that's something hard when you're moving to Savannah. Savannah is such an interesting town. But it's a very warm and welcoming town in a sense, but it's also a very skeptical town. So it takes a while, I think, to break into any sort of business or relationships, especially as an adult. It's just very different. So I felt like I had a community, that I had a circle, and I had also photographed all of the women. So I had just met so many more people, and a lot of good came out of that. So I think it helped me flourish as an artist and as a Savannian.
I wanted to actually, that was my next question to you, is let's talk about these amazing photographs that you took. When did you, I want to know how you got word out, how you, when you started taking the pictures. I want to know, tell me everything about that project.
So I presented the project to Coco first just out of posterity. I wanted to, purely for documentation, but it soon turned into a passion project. So I basically said I wanted to do this, and Coco's a huge megaphone for Savannah, so she was able to get the word out. Sulphur Studios let me use their space for free, so I set up just a very simple lighting, simple black background. My idea was to photograph everyone in sort of the same way, a face study, if you will. to sort of get rid of any judgments and pose them in such a way where you had no choice but to look them directly in the eyes, to look them in the face, but still let their personalities shine. So I would spend, roughly just a couple of minutes with each person, and I would give them the freedom. I would ask them a couple of questions. I would tell them to give me this, this face, or I would tell them, give them a scenario, what do you think about this? And it sort of ran the gamut, where some people were so happy to be a part of it, some people were feeling inspired, and others were giving me that mama bear, you are so grounded, America, look, and and some were giving me that mad moving forward, and you could really feel how they were feeling about in this particular instance and moving forward. But it was also a way to really document, for future generations, for people now in Savannah to know that these are the people that stood up for them, and this is the representation of Savannah. And like I said about the march, I was surprised the demographic that showed up, which was mostly, older women.
How many people did you photograph?
Total, I think 160.
That's fantastic. And when did you start and when did you finish?
I did 3 sessions. I don't remember the exact dates, but it was, I would say, within the 3 weeks leading up to the march. And I had I think I started with a Saturday session and it went really smoothly. And then I had a Tuesday evening session and there was a line out the door. And I only spent, a few moments with each, but I know that there were some people who were a little impatient and didn't get their photo taken because they couldn't wait any longer. And I had a 2-hour block, and I was doing nothing but photographing for that 2-hour block and maybe a little after. And then I had one makeup session after the march for those who couldn't make it, just to document more, and that was really easy. I think I only had a handful, maybe 10 people at that one.
And generally, how do people feel about getting their pictures taken?
It kind of depended on how comfortable they felt in front of the camera, but I think that they knew going into it, knowing this isn't a portrait session. This isn't for your CV or that it was just a documentation and a chance to be photographed. That being said, I think most people were very comfortable, and I think that they were inspired by the project itself. The photographs came out beautifully, and I really think it does show the range of personalities that went, and it was sort of a test. I think in January, a majority of my Facebook friends from Savannah all had that as their Facebook profile picture, which it's the age we live in, but it showed a bit of solidarity, and of course, as an artist, it makes you feel really good. But it's as mine. I took one of myself, and yeah, it was just the solidarity, just kind of it was a silent nod, maybe everyone didn't know, but you would see someone with that photo, and you're like, they did this as well. They are me.
They are very stunning photographs.
Thank you.
They're wonderful. And I like the fact that you had this very dark backdrop, because because really the focus just is so sort of particular. Where have you had them shown?
The Savannah Magazine did a piece online. I also, while I was doing the project, I asked people to write down why they were marching, if they wanted to. Not everyone did. So I had quotes to match a lot of the photographs, and which was interesting too, because not everyone was marching for the same reason. And it was interesting to hear those particular perspectives as well. So Savannah Magazine did a piece. We also did a show at Trinity Church afterward, where I had a slideshow of my photographs and I printed some of them out. In fact, I had one printed very large of a woman named Susie Hokinson, who is a fabrics artist. She is, if I had to guess, I would say 50s or 60s, and she was my poster child. She had such a interesting face, and she had just this big smile, and it was just joy, and that's really what I wanted this project to be. And like, she sort of portrayed how I felt about the project and being a part of this community. And that photograph is still missing. We have no idea where it is. So I don't think that it was malicious, that I don't know if someone took it or if it just got misplaced, but I hope that she is in a good home.
This whole project must have been a great way to kind of solidify your being here in Savannah as a member of the community in Savannah. The fact that you're documenting this activity of Savannans, that we call?
Yeah, Savannans. Yeah, it was the first time that I really truly felt part of something, and it was good. Like, I had been working, freelance since I came here. I attempted to find a job when I came here, but it was very difficult as a largely pregnant woman to, walk in for interviews. That discrimination is there. It's always going to be there. And, I wasn't sure how I would balance it anyway. Like motherhood and a full-time job. I don't know that I could have done it. I was lucky to, still work freelance and stay home with my son for 1.5 years. So doing this project, it was the really first creative thing outside of work that I had done here in Savannah. And I've always had creative outlets, even things I'm not good at. Like, I'm not a good painter. I can't draw well, but I used to do these things as creative outlets, just, like writing short stories, things like that. Like, I've always done these things. And at that time in my life, I was usurped by by family and motherhood and learning a new town that I hadn't had a chance to have any time for myself to do these projects. So while I really, as a journalist myself, I really understood the preservation part of it, the documentation, but it was also a way for me to feel creative, and it was also a way for me to heal from it.
To produce something so creative and something that will last is like, it's a total win-win kind of situation for you.
Yeah, the archivalness.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I appreciate that. You were on TV. You were interviewed. I found it. Was it one interview, or did you do multiple ones? I was on The Bridge, which is a local talk show with Clinton. We after the fact, and to promote the show at Trinity. Yes. How do you feel about that? Is that the first time you've been interviewed on TV?
No, I had actually been on that particular show a few weeks prior. I have quite a few jobs here in Savannah that I freelance, and one of them is I run the Savannah chapter of Au Pair in America. So we bring international students over as live-in nannies, au pairs, for families. So I had brought one of my au pairs on the show to talk about the program because we recently had launched it in Savannah, so it was a new program. So I knew Renee. I'd been on it before. I felt pretty comfortable. I always feel weird watching it afterward, but generally speaking, I feel pretty comfortable answering questions and sort of steering the conversation. I mean, that's what you do as a journalist as well.
You seemed very comfortable when I watched it. So let's go. Well, before that, are there any projects that you're working on right now?
I've just kind of finished a few. Not any creative projects for myself. I have, some ideas for 2018. For the rest of this year, I'm really working on archiving and doing a little bit better at that. I have all of the photos that I need to get to you, and I'm still sort of tracking down names and lining them up, because I'd like to present them to you with the person's name and information in them rather than just dumping piles of photographs. So for the future, they can put a name to a face and maybe do a little more research to find out who these people are.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So it's taking me these things take time. It's only been a year.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's talk about a post-March sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been feeling generally since this? It's 10 months. How have you been feeling?
It's hard to put into words. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say so much a roller coaster as just a steady, just. I'm shocked that this is still going on. I'm shocked that there's still support. I am becoming more and more interested in history. I want to go back to the Nixon time and talk to people. I want to talk to people about Bill Clinton. I want to have these conversations. I want to stand up and scream, this is not okay, because this is not okay. I think that, you know, I'm understanding the culture that we have created, and especially like the anonymous culture online that we have created where, you know, people can bully each other. And even, you know, as a person, not anonymously, they can bully each other, and it's polarizing. And it hasn't like stopped me from moving forward, and I think that, you know, change is slowly being made through local elections, and so I'm definitely throwing my support. I recently photographed Lisa Ring, who's running for Buddy Carter's seat, and I think what I'm doing more so is educating myself, and I think that will help. And it's not instant gratification, and that's very much the society that we live in. So it has taught me patience, and you know, I will always fight for the integrity of journalists and journalism. And I will always have those conversations with people who use the term fake media and who, you know, believe certain websites. Like Fox News is a good example. I mean, Fox News is registered as entertainment news. And I don't think people understand that. And by being registered as entertainment news, they don't have to tell the truth. And so when you're using that as your only news source and you're believing everything that they say, you're not getting the truth, and people aren't doing their homework.
A lot of people have become involved in letter writing, in indivisible groups, all of that. Did you participate in any of those things when you got back?
Yes, I've written quite a few postcards to local representation, and also there's an app, but basically a text message service that you can do, which has made it, you know, streamlined everything. It's made it very easy. So yes, I have, and that momentum has stayed, you know, throughout the year.
Good. At this point, how do you, what, like, looking forward, let's just, like, you know, what's past is past, but looking forward between, like, let's say between now and the elections in 2018, what do you hope will happen if you're looking at a cup half full kind of scenario?
I hope that there's a global awakening. I mean, that's a lot to ask. I hope that people just educate themselves. I hope that they're open to conversations instead of arguments. I just want to just tell everyone, just calm down. It's like, take a step back and really look what's going on. To maybe look at what you're doing for party loyalty and asking yourself if that's, in the end, the bigger picture, if that's really what you need to do or want to do. I think more so, I think a main difference that I see personally between Democrats and Republicans that I know is that if a Republican believed like some of the social issues that I believed, I would have no problem switching parties to vote for that candidate. But I personally do not know any Republicans who would do that. And I hate to like break it into, because I know politics isn't black and white like that, but that is my personal experience. That people just refuse to go against the party line. And that's my biggest concern with Buddy Carter. At all of the town halls that I've been to, and point blank asking him questions, if your constituents want you to vote against this that goes against your party, would you? And he said no. He said he would never go against his party. And we were talking about the Affordable Care Act. He said he would always vote his party. And that's a concern to me, because that's someone who's not doing their job. And that's what their job is, to listen to their constituents, to listen to their people. And if the majority of their people want to save the Affordable Care Act and are worried about a lack of health care, then you need to listen to that. And I think as voters, that's the only thing that we can do. We can see somebody who's not doing their job and we can vote them out. But if you have staunch Republicans who are not going to ever vote a Democrat, even if it's for their own good, then the party can never change.
What within the next year do you fear?
I have a backup plan, and never in my life have I ever been concerned. And maybe it's because I'm a mother, or maybe it's because of the state of the world. I think North Korea is a threat. I think we have a president who is a loose cannon, so I can't rule anything out. I think, especially having lived in Germany, I think, understanding how the political system works. And, Germany obviously hasn't always been on the right side of history, and they've sort of been Angela Merkel's been the big sister of Europe with like the bailouts and the economy, but they have a strong economy, and we were so disrespectful. Just on a personal level, like when President Trump refused to shake Angela Merkel's hand, like I couldn't fathom that, and it was such a power move, and it's so easily dissected from anyone who understands anything about like sociology and anything or psychology in the least. It's hard to predict what is going to happen now, and even though I voted for Obama twice, and even though like I feel like he drew some red lines in the sand that maybe I wouldn't have, or maybe I wouldn't have agreed with, I was never afraid, and I'm afraid now. And and I've had people on like the other side of the political spectrum tell me, because it's because I'm a mother now, because I'm not just thinking about myself, but and maybe that has something to do with it. I don't discount that, but I'm worried about everyone as a whole. Like I won't just take my child with me, I will take other people with me. So I worry about finances more so than I ever have. Like finding a job is harder, the middle class is shrinking, we know all of that. I don't feel the stability that was promised or that people believe that equates to living in the US.
Good times.
But I have a backup plan, so that's helpful.
So do you think would you move back to Germany?
Probably not Germany, but Europe.
Uh-huh.
Though I did love living in Germany. I guess that's an option.
It's a sound country.
It is, and I mean they pay a lot in taxes, but they have, education, healthcare, the Autobahn. I would pay higher taxes for the Autobahn, and the wherewithal of how to drive correctly on the Autobahn. Like it's and I mean the GMOs are illegal. You have to put everything that's in your food. People are healthier there. There's more green space. Like it's a beautiful country, and I think that we can learn a lot about it. And what's interesting, Der Spiegel, which is the New York Times of Germany, or the major newspaper, they had a mock election when Obama was running for presidency, and 93% of Germans would have voted for Obama. It was astounding. And I remember, I think, putting that out there, that statistic, or linking that article on a social media platform, and someone who's like someone from my hometown who's a lot older said, well, they don't have to live here. And I remember thinking how misguided that quote was, because I feel like of any of presidencies in the past, Obama was probably the most German-like, or the most in getting us to that sustainable society that the Germans enjoy.
Yeah. People have been active. I think some people are tired out of being active. What strategies would you recommend for folks moving forward to help them sort of maintain momentum, or not to get burned out?
Yeah, I mean that burnout is real, and I think that people always find a new normal within any situation, and even if the new normal is terrible, and I think people have done that here. They're so used to the news cycle, and it's a very manipulative news cycle. I think Trump does a good job of controlling the news cycle. So it's easy to just go about your life and just accept it on the smallest bit, and make change within. I don't know how to inspire, how to keep momentum. I mean, I have trouble with that in my own. I know that I attended a lot more meetings at the beginning of the year than I do now. And it's not from a lack of empathy about the situation. It's just, it's life. You're living your life. I think, that's a tough one. I think, once you have something to be excited about, usually around the time, next year in November, the local elections, I think there's going to be a lot more momentum, and it's going to start. I think it does come in waves, and the biggest thing for me, and for a lot of people I know, it's so hard to make all of these changes, and there's so many things that you want to change. So it's very helpful to pick a topic. Let's go with the environment. Let's go with the Family Care Act. Let's go with this, and then really putting your energy into that to make change with that, and to understand what you're doing is enough. That way you keep doing it.
Okay. The system that we have, we have a lot of problems just with our electoral system. It's kind of stacked against the small person. Are there things that you think need to be done to level the playing field, to make things fair?
In what sense?
We have gerrymandering, we have, voter suppression. How do we bring change in and make the electoral system fair?
I definitely think that there is problems with it. I don't think that our political system is perfect, but I also don't think it needs to be stripped down and start over. I think we have a baseline there that we can work with. And I think it all comes down to education, to getting out there. I mean, there's obviously voter suppression, and that's a tactic. That's a tactic to one side only. And change is not going to be made unless we get certain elected officials in there. And it's so disheartening that it's a Democratic or Republican problem, because that's sort of what it's come to. And when you have a two-party political system, the country is always going to be divided. And what's interesting is there's this sort of new wave millennial Republican that I always joke that is basically a Democrat from the 80s, because they're fiscally responsible, but they're socially left. And they support gay marriage and women's rights, and they fund Planned Parenthood, and but they're still Republicans, and they still call themselves that. So as each party moves, you know, it's just like the loss of the middle class. It's the loss of that overlay when it comes to political parties. An introduction of two or more parties would, I think, really, really help. But I don't know where we are in history of if I'll even see that in my lifetime.
It forces people to compromise, to talk to one another when you have that.
Mm-hmm.
So, wrapping things up, if somebody's thinking about going to a big protest in the future, what's your advice to them?
Be civil. Understand why you're there. There were a lot of emotions that I saw at the Women's March. I didn't see anything that got out of hand. And also, you know, I mean, who knows what their agenda was. But there is emotions there. And I think that there were people like trying to rile up the crowd a little bit in a negative way. So that would be my biggest advice. Just remember why you're there, and use facts and have intellectual conversations, because in a situation like that, you are allowed to have your opinions, but they don't matter in the long run. Facts matter. Why you're doing it matters. And understanding that bigger picture will help you keep sane.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you wish I'd asked you? Is there anything else that you want to talk about around this?
I don't think so. I know I did write a poem. I don't know if you saw that or if I sent that to you. I wrote a poem that I read at the event at Trinity. I could find it if you would want me to read it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me find my phone. It might take me a few minutes.
That's
I don't
fine.
know if you want to. At that time, I was reading a lot of nursery rhymes and a lot of books to my child, so I had sort of this cadence in my mind. So, and it was the easiest way that I could summarize my experience. A moment in time, we showed our muscle, a place in which admits that change is needed, work to be done, and not just dissidence. A look behind the feminist lens reveals a plan for none. The next 4 years, a spiral attempt to block what has been done. 500,000 call to action, converse with local reps. Petition signed, a Facebook post, political sidesteps. It's more than that, it's more to act. History will reveal that being old and white and male no longer has appeal. Invest your time not in what is, but what can truly be. The common effort of all, not one, will help us all to see that when life bites, strain your voice. No, it's not so pushy. March with sisters, pink cats on, and grab life by what could be. If we stop to think, Title IX enacted so long ago and we're still here. Reality is attracted to those who feel they have no voice, less privileged as it stands. It's time we listen thoughtfully to those who own this land. To those who suffer every day when fear and doubt break down, just by being different or a darker shade of brown. These are all our brothers simply standing in a row. I don't pretend to understand the hurt that they have known. but I am here, open heart, to work on a solution. And now's the time we all stand up and start a revolution.
That's awesome. That's really great. Would you be willing for me to put up a printed version of that online?
Sure, yeah.
Through our collection? You mentioned the word pussy in there. So
Well, I didn't.
Kind of, but yes, you did.
I alluded,
you alluded to
to.
But in my head I heard pussy.
Yeah.
One last question.
Sure.
Did you wear a pussy hat?
I did. I hadn't intended to, but as someone who, when I first moved to Savannah, we stayed in a long-term Airbnb while we were looking for a house, and the couple that owns it sort of took us in. They introduced us to a couple of people. They go to a Shabbat dinner every Friday, so they took us to that. We were introduced, and she knitted me a hat, and she dropped it off the night before, and she also knitted one for my son. So I did wear it, and to me, the pussy hats was a little bit, not that I thought it was crass or anything, like I thought it was poignant, and I thought it was a clever way, a clever response to what had been said, and it's also very recognizable, but it's also like, to me it's the equivalent of wearing a Trump shirt on the other side, and it sort of like blocked those out. So wearing it outside of that realm has definitely, like, you get looks, and you get people that are like kind of snarling at you, and it's so strange to me, but it also kind of checked me because I do the same thing when I see people wearing that "Make America Great Again." So it was an eye-opening perspective for me to wear this, and it made me understand both sides of it, and understand that these are my opinions and that is theirs, and one maybe isn't right or wrong, but I know that I will be on the right side of history when it reveals itself.
Yeah. Does your son, will he be wearing his this winter?
He has grown out of it, unfortunately. So I'm going to pass it on to some friends who, probably a little girl.
And will you wear yours this winter?
If it gets cold enough, yeah, absolutely. If the moment presents itself, yes. I haven't tucked it away forever, but it's also a momentum. Like, I see it and it brings me back to that time.
Awesome. Well, I thank you very much for participating in this project. It's been a great interview.
Thanks.